All right. Well, welcome everybody. Hey, we are so excited that you are here with us today live, or if you are with us as a recorded version, we're glad that you're watching this particular presentation. Today's topic is going to be about helping you to enrich your leadership growth plan. We titled it Moving from Me to We. And I don't know where each and every one of you are at as it relates to your business growth, but most of the entrepreneurs that we come into contact with want to go from having everything depend on them to having a team of people that they can depend upon and building a business that gives them more freedom from a time perspective and from a financial perspective. So today we're going to be diving into some leadership principles, and some of these might just be really good reminders for you. Some of them may be brand new, and some of them may not be 100% appropriate for where you are today. But if you want to build a profitable business, the things that we're going to talk about today are going to help you. And so we're just going to get things kicked off. And for those of you that don't know, growmyprofit.com, Jeff and I are brothers. We've started this business consulting firm to really empower business owners and entrepreneurs that are growth minded, that want to scale their business 2 to 10x in the next 3 to 5 years. And the way that we do that is we walk them through 6 steps. And over these last couple of weeks, we have been walking through the 6 steps. We started off with assessing your capacity to scale. We talked about business planning and building a financial scorecard and really casting a vision and getting clear on what your mission is and what are the financial metrics and the goals that you want to accomplish. Then we talked about marketing and lead generation. Last week, we talked about sales and sales conversion and having good fundamentals that's really moving people from prospect to paying client and returning client and referring client. And today is going to be the fifth step in our process, which is going to be about leadership. And the things that we're going to start off with is just habits, basic habits that we found to be successful in growing leaders that are building successful businesses. Talk about priorities. We're going to talk about how to raise up your performance and then raise up your team's performance. General organizational chart activities that you can use to grow your business, and then we'll take some questions from the participants. We're also going to be talking about how to build a sales team, and Jeff's going to walk through, if his voice keeps up, on how to go about moving from me to we so that you can start to grow your team around you. And this is typically where we combine the sales presentation and how to grow a sales team in our sales step. But because that was so full last week, we just decided to add it into leadership. So, Jeff, if your voice allows, would you mind just speaking into the point of reference where you move from me to we? A few years back, dozen years or so, you had hit a point where you had to rebuild and restart a new company, and you went out to your barn and you started out with a horse kicking in the background, and you bootstrapped your business from zero to hero. Would you just talk a little bit about what were some of those leadership habits that you developed early on to go from, you know, a bad situation to growing an organization that had a big 8-figure exit?
Yeah, I'll tell you that for me, growing a business to make it real big, to make a lot of money, or to sell it someday for enough money where you can retire, business is all about duplication. I mean, it's kind of an old school word, but you got to be able to duplicate yourself in some way. And what I find is a lot of entrepreneurs just don't want to let go of the reins and they want to do it all themselves. So it's really hard for them to duplicate, or they have these big egos that say, I'm the only one that can do this. No one can do it as good as me. And that's probably true. I mean, when I had my business and it was just me in the barn selling, and I did my first $1 million in sales and I made 150 grand. I think that was like 2000 and let me think, 2010, I think, is the year I started. And that one year I sold $1 million worth of junk mail, and I made 150 grand. I made a living, which was good. And I could have just stayed there and been self-employed in a one-man show with maybe an assistant. And I could have stayed small and not built a big business, but I knew that, I want to sell a company for 8 figures someday. I want to sell for 10 or 20 million and put money in the bank and retire. So I knew I had to build a business. So duplication was key. And as soon as I figure out how to do it myself, on a scale of 1 to 10, let's say that I'm an 8. I'm not a 10, I'm an 8. But if I can get enough people underneath me, I can build this business around fives. They don't have to be 8, 9, 10, perfect, great people. They just need to be, good enough to where serve the customer, have a good product. So I went to work on basically writing down everything that I did and then go hire a team and train them to do what I did. And if I sold $1 million, I know I can get these level fives to sell $500,000. And if I want to do $10 million in sales, I guess I need 40 sales reps. So I went to work with the mindset, I will hire as many people as I need to hit my revenue goal, to make the money I want to make, to be a true business owner, not a business, not a self-employed person where it's just me and an assistant doing everything. It's not really a business owner. You're more like you bought yourself a job. You got to do all the work. It doesn't duplicate when you're gone. So anyways, long answer to your question, but that's what I did. And I made that decision early on that I need to duplicate myself, whatever it takes. I'll hire as many people, so 8 years later, I've got a $20 million company making $4 million a year, and I've got 65 employees. And the only thing I'm doing is running it. But I could leave on vacation for 2 weeks and come back, and the business was bigger, and it's writing me checks every week without me having to do anything. I mean, that's the goal of business, right? I mean, to have a real business that generates money, I don't know, but while I slept, wasn't that good. Like an internet business where all the time zones, I'm getting sales in China and, international, and wasn't that good. I mean, I can't teach you how to build a billion-dollar business that's worldwide because I've never done that, but I can certainly teach people how to build a $40 million business that made $16 million. And I worked 4 days a week. I took Fridays off. For the last 20 years, I have not worked a Friday. In building businesses, growing, but having the right team, being able to duplicate myself, simplifying the process so it was a little easier to sell, and do the marketing and the lead generation to get the customers and then keep the customers, and build the product, fix the product, add on to the product. So we, because competition comes and you got to be moving. It's not like you build it and it just sits there and generates all this cash. There's some work involved, but you can do it in a logical way and build a business that cash flows a lot of money without you doing the work. And hopefully, the goal I think for everybody would be, gosh, if I could, my next business, I want to sell for 100 million. And if I sell it for 100 million at 10% interest, I could make $10 million a year in interest and really be a true free person. Right now I'm like semi-retired. I didn't get enough cash to like completely, never work again. But so, I'm building again, so to speak. But everybody would love to have a big chunk of cash in the bank and just live off interest, right? That's then you do whatever you want, go wherever you want. You don't have to answer phone calls and deal with employees. I mean, I think that's everybody's, and if you can do that in a 5 to 10 year span, it's like it's doable. I mean, I did it in 10 years, 8 years. Hopefully this time I can do it in 4. We'll see. So
Yeah, and going from one person to 65 employees, it may seem almost insurmountable or significantly challenging. So, there's obviously certain habits that need to be developed so that you can duplicate yourself. And there's certain things that we've noticed. And, climbing the mountain of success is that, you got to develop some visionary thinking, because you're not going to develop a follower until they know that you have a place that you're going and you're confident that you can get there. I don't know, that was probably at some level, Jeff, it was something that you had already developed over the years. You developed some visionary thinking and you had some resilience and perseverance. Those are some general things that you brought to the table. But when it comes down to learning habits to duplicate yourself, is there anything that you would be able to give in terms of guidance or advice to a aspiring entrepreneur that wants to duplicate themselves and wants to grow from 1 to 2 or 2 to 5 and 5 to 10? What would be the habits that you would be referring to?
well, I mean, it's in the name, right? Leadership. If you're going to grow and talk 65 employees into coming to work for you and working hard for your business, you're going to have to become a leader. So I think leadership skills. I mean, I learned a lot of my leadership skills from like John Maxwell, but That was my favorite person on leadership training. I read a lot of his books, listened to his audio, went to the seminars because no one ever taught me leadership. And where do you learn that from, right? So I listened to a lot of audio, read a lot of books, and just practiced what I learned. I was kind of self-taught because I didn't have anybody in my life teaching leadership. I had some morals and integrity. People are attracted to that. If you don't lie, cheat, and steal, you're ahead of like 50% of America because half the people out there are kind of criminal minded. So I just did the right thing. I treated people right, just normal stuff. That was pretty easy. And maybe we were fortunate to have good parents that kind of taught us just have integrity, have morals, do what you say you're going to do. Don't lie, cheat, and steal. And so some of those parts were kind of easy for me, and it's amazing just by being a pretty good person, people will follow you. But leadership skills, becoming a leader. I often say maybe I stopped selling customers in the first year. I stopped selling personally, but the rest of the 8 years, I was selling people that worked for me on working hard and continuing the fight and growing the business. So it's like I never stopped selling. I'm selling my employees now, and doing the right thing and putting the effort in and let's try a little harder. So I guess I was always selling. It just changed from me selling customers to selling my team and
Yeah, I think that
trying to.
a lot of business owners that we've come into contact, they don't necessarily like sales or they don't have sales ability. And if they don't have sales ability, the chances of them actually succeeding at a high level is not great because just what you said, everybody needs to be sold on their ability, their opportunity, the vision, the mission, how to beat the competition. There's definitely persuasion that goes into that. And we kind of caught on late to this whole idea of a healthy lifestyle. But as we started getting older, we started realizing the consequences of giving up your health to gain your wealth. What kind of advice would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur that may not be as healthy as they need to be, and some of the consequences that comes with if you don't start making some healthier choices and getting some um, uh, healthier choices or healthy habits into your life that may cause a consequence with your business?
Yeah. What could I say about health? I mean, running a business and growing it is a little bit stressful at times. And I don't want to have a heart attack and die at age 40. I mean, I had a lot of stress and pressure and money going in, money going out, taxes. I mean, it gets a little stressful. So I think to have some sort of regimen on health, I mean, both, I see Nancy on the call. It's good to see you, Nancy. Emotional health, right? That's a big part of it. Just getting my mind straight so I'm not living in fear and scared to death. And, I was thinking they gave me, when I had 40 salespeople and we did $20 million in sales when I was in my 20s, I had 40 salespeople reporting to me. And I'll never forget, they gave me this leadership trophy and it said, our fearless leader. And I was like, they have no idea. I'm scared to death every day what I'm doing here, but I don't really show it. I'm trying to lead without fear, but emotional health, physical health, mental health, super important. I mean, it takes a lot of energy to build a business. And I think if you're, 100 pounds overweight and exhausted all the time, it might be hard to do, not to mention, it's putting pressure on your heart and, business and growing something does take a lot of effort, both physically and mentally. So you got to be in good health on both sides. So, I mean, I've done a lot on both sides, physical and emotional health, because I'd be going crazy at times and just go get some outside help. Or physically, I was running 20, 30 pounds overweight and a lot of stress. And I'm like, I don't want to, our grandfather died of a heart attack, right? When mom was 16 years old. And so we've got it in our family. So I'm like, so I dropped 20 or 30 pounds and I felt good. I felt a lot of energy. I work out at night because it takes all the stress away. So you have to do what works for you. I mean, it was never drastic. It's like 3 days a week for 30 minutes. I'm working out and then I'm doing some cardio another day or two. So, drop some weight, getting physical health. And then the mental health is probably more important. And
Yeah,
Nancy
even
knows a
even
lot
now,
about
it's
that.
something where that's one of the things I've really respected about Jeff is that he's got a personal training appointment, and it's 3 days, 3 times a week at least, and it is like non-negotiable. Like it is, I gotta go. I'm off. I'm out. And he prioritizes it, and that's the kind of level that as I've gotten older, I ended up losing 100 pounds 15 years ago, and I didn't realize how much my extra weight was costing my business. In terms of energy, I used to think of exercise as a time trap, or a time waster. I didn't have time to exercise. And then I read some studies that showed that entrepreneurs that exercised were more creative, more productive, more energetic, more attractive to the marketplace. And I thought, hey, I'm actually taking away my opportunities by not exercising rather than actually prioritizing it like I'm the best client that we have. So hopefully, Nancy, we answered your question about duplication, but ultimately the concept of duplication is taking what it is that you're doing, transferring that to somebody else who can do it at least 50% of what you can do, and then growing them to the place where you no longer have to do that responsibility, which then gives you scale, right? Because if you take your, let's just say 40 hours a week, and you divide 40 hours a week into 4 people, and each one of them has 40 hours a week. Now you've just gone from being open 40 hours a week to being open 40 times 5, 200 hours a week, because now you got 4 other people plus yourself that are working 40 hours a week. And if your business is open 200 hours a week versus 40, you're likely going to scale and grow profitability. Systems is another way of duplicating yourself, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Delegation is another one that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, and just priority management. There's so many things as an entrepreneur to do. I know, Jeff, your joke is that you would have delegated going to the bathroom if you could. How did you get to the point where you could delegate confidently and not feel like that somebody was going to drop the ball?
I used to just do this fun little exercise in math where I would say, okay, how many hours do I work and how much money do I make? And the first time I made $1 million in a year, you do the math, you divide your $1 million by 2,080 hours, and it tells you what your hourly rate is. And I remember the year I made $4 million, I was making $2,000 an hour. And I don't care. There was a time where it was 20 bucks an hour. There was a time when it was 200 an hour. But I just always looked at this like, if I'm making $2,000 an hour, why would I be doing that job that I could pay $20 an hour to? But more important than that, I hired some people and I paid them, $100 an hour to do big things. And that's scary to onboard someone at a high level that can really do. They did a better job than I did in that area, like operations manager, CFO, COO. Like I'm not real good at that stuff. So I learned pretty good what I was good at. And driving sales and marketing was like the most important part of the business because that's what made the numbers go up. And that's all that matters in business is the numbers, revenue, profit, multiple, what you're going to sell for, what you're going to make. So I kept my eye on that and delegated pretty well. But I do remember times where I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm telling someone else to do that. It would only take me 15 minutes and I could do it myself. Why am I delegating that? I would feel guilty, but then I would come back to, okay, 15 minutes is I'm making $500 every 15 minutes. So what I'm sorry that I'm having to delegate such a small task that you think was easy for me to do, but I just became very aware of the value of my time and where my time was going. My time, 90% of my day was driving revenue. End of story. Revenue and profit. Now, sometimes building new products, adding on things to my company made more sales, which made more revenue. So I'd work on product development, sometimes working on accounting and looking at, how much money I was spending on buying 10 million envelopes a month. I would work with vendors and get pricing because that was more money. So it wasn't always sales related as the CEO, but just getting an idea of what your time's worth and not just what it's worth now, but what is it worth next year when this business doubles? Like I gotta stay in revenue producing activities. I was pretty good at that and delegating everything below. And sometimes delegating means hiring. I
Yeah.
hired 65 people and it was like, you got to do this. You're going to do this. I'm not part of that anymore. It was like constantly having to give stuff up. And I think that's hard for a lot of entrepreneurs that are trying to make their business perfect. Perfectionism can be a curse.
Yeah.
I want it all done right, and I'm the only one who can do it. Well, you're never going to get big with that in mind. You've got to be able to give some stuff up. So,
I made some mistakes early on when I first got started in the idea of hiring out and delegating, is that I gave other people things to do, but I didn't fully give it up. So I was still involved in it, and I wasn't free to go out there and pursue the things that I really needed to go spend my time on to justify this new expense. Or I ended up delegating things off and somebody else would take it on. But I would go spend time in creative avoidance of not doing the things that were income producing. And so for those of you that may struggle with actually doing the things that are profit based, production based, income revenue generation based, you want to be very careful of going out there and starting to hire more people to do what it is that you do, unless you're going to replace your time with more profitable activities or more of the same revenue producing activities. I don't know if anybody's ever used it. Jeff, I think Jeff started using a Franklin planner when he was probably 16 or something like that. And so I kind of followed suit. So we've been carrying around Franklin planners, since we were young pups. I've converted that now. I don't know what if you use a digital planner, Jeff, but I converted this concept. If you can see my phone, I have this daily. This is just an example of it. I have a daily reminder on my phone. It's called an extraordinary planner, and this is the concept that I use. Is I put in there. It's an every day at 7:45 in the morning, and I list out my priorities. And this just goes back to the old version of Franklin Covey planners. And I put in all of my things in organized, prioritized order. And I update that on a daily basis. So I have one recurring appointment. I know that I've got a lot of other features in my phone that can allow me to organize this, but I have everything on one single appointment that recurs every single day. And I just reprioritize that one appointment, and I know exactly what my projects are, what are my most important habits, what are the people that I need to reach out to. It's been an extraordinary way for me to get more done with less time. But what do you use, Jeff, for time management?
yeah, it's funny. I use Outlook on my calendar and I literally just block out time. Here's the 5 things I have to do today. And I put it on my calendar the time I'm going to do it. And that just alarms me to where I just have to finish it. Once in a while I don't get it done and I reschedule it for the next day. But I basically work on 5 things that are important every day. You know, the small business that I'm running, a managers meeting every week, that's on the calendar to get all the feedback and talk through issues. But I basically just use my Outlook calendar, which is on my phone. And, I'm big on that. I'm not writing lists anymore. And yeah, Franklin Covey, I got 20 years up on my bookshelf here of years. It's crazy. I go back and look at what I was doing in my 20s and 30s, what I was working on. It's kind of funny to pull those out once in a while. But so I kind of miss the paper because it's not something, the everything digital, you're not gonna be able to leave to your kids. It's like, all the books and people are doing audio books and, what's the other one from Amazon? My wife, Tiffany, always orders books online, but I'm like, you're not gonna be able to give those to your kids. Like I've got a library full of physical books, the whole digital, just like pictures, right? I have photo
Mm,
albums. How am I going to download 2,000 pictures on Facebook and give it to my family, my grandkids, right? If the world lasts that long, great grandkids. It's kind of funny. I struggle with some of the digital, um, but yeah, that's what I use mainly the calendar.
yeah. Well, we're going to open it up for questions here. So those of you that are participating live, if you have a question that you want to throw out to Jeff about some of the topics that we're covering or another topic that we haven't covered yet as it relates to leadership, we'd love to open it up for some Q&A here in just the next few minutes. So get your questions ready. We're going to talk a little bit about peak performance and building a peak performance culture. So, there's a phrase out there that says your vibe attracts your tribe. And so not everybody has the exact same vibe, and therefore they don't attract the same tribe. And it's cool that you get a chance to kind of create your vibe, whatever that is for your organization and for the culture that you want to create. And I think it was Peter Drucker that says culture trumps strategy 100% of the time. So when you have great culture and you have great people, a lot of times the other things just take care of themselves. As long as you know where you're going and you're a good leader, the rest of the stuff can take care of itself if you hire the right people. And a small team of A people can run circles around a large team of C people. But what were some of the things, Jeff, that I don't know if there's any on the list here that really speak to you, but when it comes down to growing performance from ordinary people and turning them into extraordinary, what would you say is a couple of key tips?
Most people can't manage themselves. That's what I've learned after having hundreds, maybe thousands now of employees, that they just have no plan to manage their own life. So you really have to treat them like children, as far as just giving them like paper, post it somewhere to let them know what their job is. Most people aren't self-motivated, I've learned. So the more I can help them write out their goals, figure out what you're supposed to be doing every day, then they actually do it and they're more successful. They make more money and they thank you. It's funny, I was talking to my CPA the other day. He goes, Jeff, do you realize I've had 10 people sell their businesses like in the last 2 years? I've never had 10 in 10 years. And he goes, they all say the same thing. I'm tired of babysitting. And my CPA goes, and what I tell him is, oh, you didn't know you signed up to be a professional babysitter when you started a business? That's part of the deal. If you don't like it, yeah, you can sell your business and go get out and retire. But it's funny, like you don't think about that, but nobody wants to babysit, but that's a big part of the job, and you have to become okay with that, or just stay real small, don't make any money, don't ever have a big exit. I mean, you have options, but being okay with babysitting and training and just giving goals and expectations, and holding people accountable is so hard, especially in today's day and age. People are so entitled. Nobody really wants to work. It's getting harder. Work from home, you don't know what they're doing all day for employees. So it's like setting clear expectations and just having good reporting that comes back to you and tells you what the activity level is, so you can hold people accountable, like what Vivian's company does. I love that, that Google Docs, Excel, Salesforce, all coming into one. That's a powerful thing to have your finger on the pulse. It's so important. And sometimes just by posting the numbers in the room or on a dashboard on their computer every day, they come into work and they see, like salespeople, where they're at on the stack ranking. Oh, I'm not working hard, I'm at the bottom. The competition forces them to go up. So I don't have to be the guy telling them what to do every day and preaching. It's like the numbers show and kind of talk for themselves. So I love having, dashboards and having it visible so everybody knows where they're at. I'm big on the book Traction, and we implemented Traction at two of the companies that I owned and had big goals. And we moved toward those goals by setting goals, but giving the managers goals and the salespeople goals, and then holding them accountable to hit them. And it's amazing when you start building accountability into your company grows. Or the people don't like it and they get out. They usually quit, which is great. Hey, you don't want to be held accountable. You don't want to work. Here's, get out early because this ship's going up. And if you don't want to, come along with us, then it kind of forces them out. It's great. It chops off all the bad employees that weren't going to do it anyways, So I don't know if that answered your
Yeah.
question, but that's what I thought of.
I was talking to Eileen Fromm yesterday. She's the former ex-wife of Michael Gerber, who wrote the book E-Myth Revisited. And they've been doing this for, I don't know, since 1977, she said. And
Wow.
her comments from the book that her ex-husband wrote, E-Myth Revisited, the one that really stuck with them is people do one thing predictably, and that's that they act unpredictable. And so building out a organizational chart and knowing what it is that people's role is, and then what are the job responsibilities and the roles that they're supposed to play in that particular position. And when you're a small business, your name is in each one of these categories until you begin to train it out. And so one of the strategies that they recommend in the E-Myth book, which is now 40 years old, is to take out and draw out your organizational chart and write your name in every one of the boxes and pick the job that you want to get rid of first. Like, what's the job that you hate the most? Or what's the job that you think would be the most helpful to help you to grow? And write out the job description for that particular position. And now you have a job title or a job description that you can go out there and match, whether you hire somebody that's a virtual support service or a virtual salesperson, whether you use technology, but at least now you know this is what my organization should look like in the next 3 to 5 years. If I'm growing to the level that I want to grow, now I just need to start filling in the slots and replacing myself with somebody else. And this is just, business building 101. I know for some of you, you're far advanced beyond this. You already have an organizational chart, you already have job descriptions, but going from me to we is going to require a bit of a plan. So let's just talk about questions or common issues. I see Minnie is off camera. Nancy, what's your question? Do you have something you want to ask?
Yeah, I worked for corporations that instead of hiring employees, they hired contracted person. And I know there's a lot of liabilities with employees, and you have to have an HR person and this regulations. Contracted people seems to be a lot easier to hire. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've had independent contractors before. The challenge is if they're working for 5 other companies and I'm only paying for 20 hours a week, I never got the focus out of them to really come on board with my company and really be part of the team to grow it. So I didn't have that great of experience with independent contractors just because of the lack of focus, and you really can't tell them what to do. They work for so many people. So my experience was never really that great. I decided to hire employees and take on all that HR, benefits, lawsuits. I mean, I had to take all that on, and it is a little scary. That's probably one of the biggest pain points of growing a business, especially here in California. But I hired a PEO company, private employment organization, to manage all of my HR. They kind of have a minimum of like 5 employees, so it's hard to go from 1 to 5. But once you're at 5, I paid them $150 a month per employee. They managed everything. And it was like the hours, they're always warning me about overtime, meal and rest period. When I go to fire someone, I consult with them and they give me the letter to do it correctly. They have labor law attorneys. So I got a lot for $150 a month per employee, and it helped me manage it because I knew I wasn't very good at that. And I didn't want to bring in an HR manager and pay him or her $80,000 a year because I couldn't afford it. So I just paid 150 a month per employee. So I use currently I'm using Trinet, which has been amazing. I think it saved me on a lot of areas where I didn't feel like I was at much at risk. I also had a labor law attorney. I would call my attorney. He'd go, Jeff, labor law is so major in California. You need specifically an attorney for that. Um, so whenever things were going down, I would consult him and pay him a few $100s to save me a few 100,000. I mean, in the 10 years of having 65 employees, I had like 5 lawsuits. I won 4 of them. One cost me 10 grand and one cost me 25,000. So if you look at my track record in employee, keeping track of hours is so crucial. Overtime, crucial. Class actions, luckily I never had one, but is like $75,000 in payouts was pretty good for doing, over $100 million in sales. And so, it's like having someone else. It's funny, I just said I don't like outside contractors, but when it comes to that whole employee HR benefits, I outsourced all of it because I didn't want to have it in-house. So that's just my take. I don't know if when you say outside consultants, if you're talking about hiring someone to do like sales or more delivery of the product. I know you're have kind of a unique business where it's more services, right? So if you're trying to duplicate yourself, instead of bringing on someone on payroll for 80 grand a year, if you can pay them $500 every time they do work, right? That might be easier. So it might make sense to start it outside contractor, and then, but eventually, if I want to control it and protect my brand, because I'm building this big and I want them to conform to the way I do things and my service level, and someday I plan to sell it, I think you kind of have to do it in-house and build it internally. I don't know if that helps, Nancy. Does that
Yeah,
answer some of your questions?
I think it takes a different management style too to manage or oversee independent contractors because you really can't tell them what to do as an independent contractor, or you cross over the line and become an employer. And so, leading a volunteer army of sorts, it's different. Leading vendors, that's different. Um, I also think that there is some scalability there, Jeff. I mean, like we're using outsources for marketing, outsources for digital social media tools. And so I do think that there are some scaling factors where you can start out with those things. But Minnie, did you want to ask a question? I see your hand was up.
I do have a question. I was wondering if you guys ever use any sort of consultants for revenue cycle management um, in a service. Well, so basically for like a physician-based clinic, let's say, where that becomes really important. Do you guys use that in your business ever, like consultants to check revenue cycle, make sure everything is coming in the way it's supposed to, that kind of thing?
I'm not real familiar with the term revenue cycle. That sounds interesting. The cycle of revenues, like when the money's coming in, or that sounds
Yeah.
like maybe billing, or it almost sounds more like a CFO role, like more accounting. Is the money coming in, or when's it coming, to be able to build the business, have enough money coming in as you're cranking up your expenses? So could I just clarify, like when you talk about revenue cycles, outside
Yeah.
consultant to help sell more, or more of like project when the money's coming in? Because that kind of sounded more like a CFO to me.
It's
Could you
more like
clarify?
cash flow stuff in a clinic because cash flow is so important. And when you submit billing in a physician's office, then it takes a certain amount of time for that to come back. It goes through various payers and insurance companies. Then you have to figure out like, are the payers paying the right amount? Are we getting paid whatever, is in the contract? And then is someone following up to make sure that we're getting paid appropriately within the office? Are they letting claims kind of go because they're too difficult to deal with? So they kind of like have been writing them off. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
that goes with revenue cycle in a physician's office. And so I just wondered if you guys had any experience with anyone in that area, um, you know, because I'm
Yeah.
really looking for someone to come in and do that and just make
I
sure
have an
everything.
out I have an outsourced CFO person that does a lot of that for my wedding business, because we sell weddings a year in advance and they got to make 12 payments and then the wedding happens. So it's
Mhm.
kind of very complicated with cash flow. It's good
Yeah.
because they pay up front, but it's very complicated to try to get it on like an Excel sheet to look at it. So I could
Mhm.
refer you somebody that would be really good at that. Yeah, if you bill out 5 insurance companies and it's like, oh, this one pays in 30 days and this one pays
Mhm.
in 90, getting a good cash flow analysis is kind of important to manage the business, predict the future, and especially if you're growing it. So I could refer you someone. Her name is Lisa, and she's great. She does it for me and
Mhm.
works independently, kind of like an outsourced CFO. Um,
Mhm.
that's not necessarily selling more patients or growing revenue, but just managing
No.
the existing and knowing, having some sort of forecast for cash on whether you can afford to hire someone to know if you have enough cash to do it, right? That would be, she'd be great for that. So I can
Yeah.
share her name, phone
Okay.
number, email. She's in San Diego. I don't know what state you're in. Are you local or same time
We're in
zone?
North Carolina.
Okay, so East Coast, but three
Yeah.
hours ahead. No big deal. She's in
Hmm.
San Diego. She worked for an outsourced CFO company and then went off on her own. So she's a lot cheaper rate. So I could refer her to you, and it might be good to
Okay.
have a conversation with her. She builds my cash flow forecast every month for Hawk Ranch weddings. We're trying to go from $1 million in weddings to 2 million, and there's money going in, out, everywhere. It's
Yeah.
confusing. So it was good to
Yeah.
get a better handle on it and get a better read on the business. Although I have
Okay.
to get a hold of Vivian and stop using 5 different spreadsheets and try to tie all this together. I'm excited, Vivian. I think we're going to be a client of yours. I've got a Google Doc spreadsheet with all the weddings. I got QuickBooks. I got a CRM. I've got cash flow analysis. It's like 7 different things, like doing, what you do. I just feel like, there's so many businesses that need what you offer, just trying to figure out how to grow it and how to duplicate yourself, right? You can't do it all. So you're gonna have to teach people, and you got to have somebody out there selling and talking to people about what you do. So maybe a good segue into, if you have any questions after you've been growing your business for what, just a couple of years. It's like you kind of went off on your own and on your way to $1 million in sales and trying to build something, a real business that pays you when you're in Europe, right? Like, tell me, what do you think about all this, like duplicating your business? Is it Is it
So it's
possible?
kind of interesting because in our business, it duplication is sort of dead in. Because so what we have done is we've created systems for our business that apply and then we can go sell it. So the systems are in place, but now we're to a point where we're actually hiring contractors. So it is interesting to hear about, your experience. Um, but the way that we hired them is they're coming in to do this project. So they're going to help me with this automation. They're going to help me with this. So they're not, if they don't get it, they don't get paid. So I don't have to tell them necessarily like what to be doing every day. I tell them this is your budget and you got to work in this budget and get this done by this date. And then if they don't get it done, then they don't get paid. So that's how we're running it. But I mean, eventually we're going to have to get employees. We have a list that's way too long for us to do,
To outsource everything. And what's
Yeah,
hard today, now we pay $20 an hour, and I've got guys paying $2 an hour in the Philippines and India, getting better work than they'd get here for $20 an hour. So that it's like, how do you ignore that, right? In a business that takes
yeah,
just
that's
a lot of
another
labor
thing.
hours, you got to
Yeah,
look at that to be competitive.
yes,
But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, so I'm actually talking with people across, yeah, the world that
yeah,
they, and then some of it does bother me because I'm like, am I being, ethical? But,
right.
there's always that question.
Trust me,
So
they absolutely love making $2 an hour compared to what they would
It's
be
amazing.
be
doing
compared to
without it,
nothing,
right? I know.
so yeah, but it's developing the relationships and then the time zone is an issue. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's different challenges with it, but
Jeff's got
How's it
yeah,
another
going
contact.
for onboarding new clients, like trying to go get 10 more clients paying you $1,000 or $2,000 a month, right? That's what really builds the business. You can fulfill the back end. Most
yeah,
people can figure
yeah,
that out. If you have the clients coming in and it's just, hey, it's too much to handle, as long as you're profitable and you're selling it for enough money to afford that 20, 30, $40 an hour person that you might need to fulfill the back end.
right.
I think if you find a way for revenue to come in and new clients, the back end's easier to fix than the front end.
Agreed, agreed. I know. And our customers right now are municipalities and cities and like LA County. And so that is another reason why I'm not sure that I want to hire overseas entirely because they might have stipulations and
Data security and that.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 So it's kind of interesting, but it's a great problem to have.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
keep telling Robert that I'm like, it's a great problem to have.
But Jeff's got a contact in the Philippines that might be a good contact for you, Vivian, if you are going overseas to do some outbound support stuff. But
Oh, that'd be great.
for
I'd love
anybody,
that.
Dean, right, Jeff? Toro's business.
Yeah, a friend of mine retired there and has a big call center with 50 employees. It's amazing what they do over there with high-speed internet and phones and, whatever you hear about call centers. I just spent 4 grand at Tractor Supply, and they're like, if you open up a credit card, you get 10% off. And I'm like, oh, that would be great. So I mean, I'm on the phone with Citibank, and they send me to the Philippines, to India, and they don't understand. And I'm like, if Citibank can get away with this and Tractor Supply, I should be able to get away with it. But I don't want to, offer that horrible customer service where
Right.
you can't understand them, they can't solve problems. It's just funny that
Everything is just hold, please,
yeah, yeah,
or
it's
call
yeah,
back.
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not have a great experience with Tractor Supply. I'm a little upset with them, with Citibank, just in trying to just spend 4 grand on fencing to build some more fences at Hawk Ranch. It's like crazy. Like, was it that difficult? You can't really go in the store. It's interesting. So,
Yeah, that
anyways,
is.
Well, if we don't have any other questions right top of mind, I'd like to navigate into the sales team growth because this is an important factor for many people to go from me to we. And we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on this particular topic, but I wanted to let everybody know that we do have a full-blown course that's inside of our Scale University. Everybody that's been doing this 30-day Grow My Profit program has access to. the classroom. All of our recordings for the 30-day Grow My Profit Challenge are listed here. But inside of this course here, we have all of our 6 steps. And there is a lot more detail as it relates to your sales plan, how to grow revenue, how to maximize a team, interview questions. We've uploaded, Jeff has had some amazing experience with these particular interview questions. So a lot more resources online, and there is a video that you can watch that's 48 minutes long that walks you through some of the things that we're going to be talking about. So that's on Scale University, and I'll put that inside of the chat and put it with the recording as well, so people can go on there and access it. It's only $99 per month. People that registered for the challenge got access to that particular service. But let's go ahead and just finish off, Jeff, with just the stepping stones to growing from me to we when it comes to building a sales team. So we talk about the very first step is to evaluate your team. And if you are that team, what is the area that you need the most support around, or where could you best leverage your talents, your gifts, your skills, and duplicate yourself? Anything specifically in the area of team evaluation, if somebody already has a team, what to look for before recruiting and bringing on new people?
Yeah, so I would say building a sales team, I got to go back to 8 years ago when I hired my first 4 salespeople. But I think most people they believe that if I'm going to hire a salesperson, I got to pay him 80 grand or guarantee or draw or 100,000. I got to, guarantee him $100,000, and I don't have the money to do it. I'm not doing it. I hired 1,000 salespeople over the last 20 years at minimum wage, and people were shocked that I was able to do it. Minimum wage. I mean, minimum wage now is what, 16 or 16.50 an hour. So it's no longer $8 an hour. I mean, it's $30,000 a year minimum wage. So I got to pay them for their hours, and I got to pay them minimum wage. That's just labor laws. But then I just pay them fat commissions. And I had a salesperson who made $32,000 base and 3.1 million in commissions the year I sold my company. It was crazy. Like, it was almost laughable, right? He has a salary, not even a salary, it's hourly. In California, you can't even offer salaries anymore. Minimum salary is double minimum wage. So $32 an hour, $68,000 a year is the minimum salary if you don't want to track hours. And then if they're not managing people, you can get sued for not, they're not really a manager. So minimum wage, minimum wage, minimum wage. That's what I did. I did it at my mortgage company, at my ad agency. I'm doing it here at the wedding venue. Never changes. It works. So minimum wage plus fat commissions. So that's the comp plan that's so important. But when I hire someone, every salesperson, anybody that's decent in Southern California has got to make 100 grand a year. It's got to be a 6-figure income. So if it's 30,000 in base, I just do the math on how you can make $70,000 working here. If I pay 10% commission, you're going to sell $700,000 worth of my product to make 70 grand. Or maybe you're real profitable, so you could pay 20% commission. Now that salesperson has to sell $350,000 worth of revenue to make 70 grand in commission plus their 30,000 base. There's your 100 grand. I always show a salesperson how they can get to $100,000 in income. And then I break it down to how many clients you have to sell per month. If you have a repeat business, you got to put that repeat business. So I had this little Excel sheet that would say, sell 4 new clients a month, and 2 of them will reorder every month. You're going to lose 2 clients. We don't keep 100% of our clients. So 4 plus 2, 4 plus 2. And it kind of showed this graph. And that's what I would use in my interview. This is what's expected out of you. This is how you can make 100 grand. You're not going to make it your first month. It might take you 6 months to build this, but I think in 6 months' time, you could be making 7,000 or 8,000 a month, and you get repeat business, and people love our service and our product. So they're going to keep coming back. So that's kind of how I sold the job, so to speak, sell the dream, where I'm paying a little bit out there, but most of these jobs were always on commissions. And I would pay, I W-2'd a guy for $3.2 million. The year I sold I will pay unlimited commissions. I never even looked at that like, oh, I could probably cut his commission in half and keep the rest of the money. No way. Because that salesperson, everybody else was following that guy going, gosh, if this guy can make 3 million, I bet I could make 300,000. And it motivated the whole team to, so it was always great to have a salesperson making a lot of money. So I don't know, that's kind of, and then, designing a little quota system. Here's how much revenue you have to bring in to keep your minimum wage job. You're not sitting here bringing in zero. You're not even worth minimum wage. If you bring in no new clients, you're out. 30 days, I'm going to fire you. I mean, I had to have it very set up to where you're going to bring in X amount of new clients and revenue. And if they don't have the dollars coming in, they are going to have the appointments where we're presenting to qualified people that could use our service. So if we don't have the money coming in, I change that to a quota for how many presentations you're doing. And in order to get 10 presentations in our business, we had to talk to probably 30 people. And if we're going to talk to 30 people, we might have to make 100 phone calls to get 30 people to respond on the phone or through email or through LinkedIn. So we had expectations for calls, presentations, and new customers every month. That was so crucial.
What about recruiting? Where would you go for your recruiting of new staff members? Did you have a go-to, or would you have a go-to as of today?
Recruiters would be like, oh, if your sales reps are going to make 100 grand, we're going to charge you 20%, $20,000 up front. I'm like, hell no. We're going to run an ad on 3 different platforms for $100 and we're going to work hard interviewing. I just never had success with recruiters, not for sales anyway. So I would literally run ads and people would be like, don't run an ad on Craigslist. You're attracting the bottom. Some of my best salespeople came off ads on Craigslist, but that wasn't, I put it on Monster, Craigslist, Career Builder. It's like $100 a month. I had a $500 budget. I'm running the ad everywhere and I'm getting 50 to 100 resumes a month. My big thing was I would run that disc profile and make sure they had a sales personality, because you can't teach a sales personality. They got to have some drive and influence. If they don't have drive and influence, I don't even want to interview them. So I would run them through disc and spend some money to pre-qualify them out. Um, I don't know. Most of the people I hired had absolutely no experience in my business, and I taught them. So I had like a 7-day training class and ongoing training. So I didn't really have to find people with, I hired 10 loan officers that had never done a loan before, and the next year they all made 100 grand each selling loans. They had no clue what they were doing. And direct mail, how many people have sold direct mail before? Like none. So I just brought in people that had some selling abilities, some drive, and a goal for income. And I just bolted on the little, here's what we're selling, and taught them. And it's not that hard. I was pretty good at simplifying things and just having, I did like, maybe it was like a 5-day training class to where they had everything. And then weekly, training a couple hours a week. And it was amazing how somebody without, if they're creative and a good salesperson and driven and have a little bit of smarts and personality, it was amazing how they would find revenue. It wasn't that difficult. So recruiting, team evaluation, I don't know if that covers what you were asking, but those are just some things that, high level things I remember doing.
Yeah, one of the simple things that I've done with other business owners, just challenging them to list out, who are your top 10 or 20 people that right now, that if you went to them, they would likely know the kind of person that you're looking for. Once you've identified who you're looking for, having a short list of 10 or 20 people that you could reach out to, in addition to running the ad. Because sometimes you may just have an opportunity now using social media or using connections and trusted advisors that you count on. They may have somebody in mind that's in the spot for what it is that you need. So we utilize simple tools, just helping people to identify ideal candidates, and then just grading them and ranking them and prioritizing your follow-up. So something as simple like that can end up helping you to expand your team. Jeff, you talked about the interview process and utilizing the DISC profile, and speak a little bit more about that. And if people wanted to go out there and utilize the DISC profile for their interviewing process, what would be the best resource to direct them to?
I've used 3 or 4 of these personality profiles and they're all very similar. I really like disc, but it's mainly because I've been doing it for 20 years, so I understand it. It's easy for me to read. Basically, you take a personality profile test and you answer these questions, and it comes back and tells you whether they're D, I, S, or C. So D is kind of drive, dominance, and I is influential. Um, oh, there's another word for the I that I can't think of right now. Darn it. Yeah, it's influence. So, and then S is steady and C is conscientious. So all of my receptionists of the buildings were always high S's, very steady, show up on time, answer the phone, do the same thing every day. If you give them instructions, they follow it to a T. They're great, easy employees, but it's very hard for them to sell, especially if they're hunting, if they're out reaching out trying to get business. They can work a trade show booth when people come up interested and sell them something at the trade show booth. But my business did not do trade shows. We dialed the phone outbound and we had to hunt. It was a tough job. So for me, the DI personality, D and I together is best, but I'll take one or the other. That was my D and I for sales. If I wanted to hire an accountant or an engineer, I'd look for a high C. Conscientious, they're always looking at the numbers, the graphs, but they don't make for very good salespeople. They're just not, they don't build rapport. They're more analysis paralysis. So I had every personality type in my company, but I only put high DIs in sales. And I would hire every once in a while, I'd break the rule and I'd go, okay, this person's so good with all the experience, I'm going to hire him. And it just never worked. It was like my little secret weapon. Like, if you have drive and influence, you'll make it here in sales, or not for sure, because you might not have a work ethic, or you might be a jerk. And I might have to fire you because you're a jerk and you don't do what you say. You're mean to customers. You got all kinds of craziness of personalities out there, personal issues, alcoholics, drug addicts. I mean, it all comes in right in sales jobs. So it's like, it wasn't 100%, but it was literally like 70% success rate. So that's why I just leaned. I used to tell my sales managers, I go, hey, if they have a high DI sales personality, I don't even need to do the interview. Hire them. Hire them. I don't have to ask even a question, because that was more accurate than my interview. Because when you interview people, they're all great salespeople in the interview. So you really don't get what's inside, what they're made of like the drive, the influence, the competition, the hunting, the rapport building. You don't really, everybody's a salesperson in an interview. I got to the point where I just didn't even want to do interviews. Just run the test. If they score high, if they have a personality for sales, bring them in, because we're going to give them a shot no matter what. And it was almost to that point. So that, and then my interview questions I've got. Yeah. These are some of I've used this interview for 20 years. And it's funny. I just did a college. Let me think about what this was. It's the college in Escondido, Cal State San Marcos. They said, well, Jeff, will you do some interviews for these college kids that are taking business classes so they can get some experience? And I go, yeah. And I interviewed 4 kids that were like 20, I think they're sophomore, junior, senior, 20, 21, 22. And I was blown away, because as I'm talking to them, I could tell the personality of who is going to be good in sales, outgoing, driven, competitive, asking me questions. And then the real quiet one that was really smart, I could almost identify what personality they were and who would make it in sales, just because I've done it so long, so many times. It was very interesting interviewing these college kids it was a mock interview, but I'm like, hey, you're going to come to work at Ock Ranch and sell weddings. So that's what you're interviewing for. Did you go to my website and do any research on the company before this interview? No, I didn't. That is a big mistake. You might want to know something about the company you're interviewing to go to work for. So it was fascinating. So that interview process, but I asked them those sales questions, and a couple of those questions are designed to find out if they have enough clock speed to answer a question or an objection. Because I was taught 25 years ago, you cannot teach clock speed. They either have it or they do not have it. You could teach a lot of things, how to close a sale, how to build rapport. You can teach a lot of things, but if you can't teach clock speed. So one of the questions is, tell me about a time you had an objection and you couldn't overcome it. And if they're like, or they just can't come up with an answer. They don't have the clock speed. Salespeople have to answer questions quickly and cover, even if they're kind of making it up and they're trying to think of the right answer, but they can say a few words to buy a little time and they come back. If you can't do clock speed, you really can't be a top performing salesperson. And there was a couple of those kids that I haven't interviewed in like 3 years. I mean, I hired 1,000 people, so I used to interview 4 times a month. It was just part of my job and I enjoyed it. But doing these college kids in the last 30 days was hilarious. It just brought me back to that interview and watching people stumble over questions. They didn't have the clock speed to come back and answer. And you're like helping them along. You're like, well, like this one girl said she sold wine club at the wineries. And I'm like, well, tell me a question you'd ask to find out what you would sell them. And she's like, well, maybe I'd ask where they live. I'm like, well, yeah, they're signed up for wine club in Temecula. You're selling wine club. Find out where they live. I guess there's a little relevance there. How about this question? I'm like, how about this question? Do you drink white wine or red wine? She's like, that's a great idea. I'm thinking, you didn't think of that one? You're selling wine. I mean, that's kind of important. Are you a white or a red? Because you're selling wine club. You're going to ship wine to their house every week. She couldn't even come up with one question to ask to direct them into buying wine club at Temecula Winery. And I'm like, you'd never make it. Like, if you can't come up with an answer to this. So there's 2 or 3 questions on those out of those 20 that are really designed to measure clock speed. If they have no clock speed, you cannot hire them. It's just, instead of having to hire 10 salespeople to find 2 that are successful, you'll only have to hire 4 to find 2. You're still going to have turnover and people that don't work and people that are crazy and personal problems. My 7th divorce and I can't work and I can't make fun. You got to deal with people, which is craziness, right? But it just limits the amount of turnover and making a little bit better hires. Not perfect. I burned through a lot of people, but it just improved all my ratios. My interview questions, my disc profile, crucial. I still do it to this day, so whatever, some shortcuts to sales, but it's not perfection, but it improves your ratios. That's all I could say.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up here today, I just want to go through a couple more items here. Hold on just one second. Let me bring up the final wrap up screen here. So we've talked a little bit about the idea of evaluating your team and knowing who you're recruiting or who you're trying to fill in a position or what type of personality style. You have your interview questions, which all of those interview questions are in the Scale University platform if anybody wants to go in and dig into that, as well as the information and examples of the DISC profile. You've got your hiring and your onboarding process, which you have simplified that down so that you had a good process to make sure that they were brought up to speed. And then you were really big on training up and coaching up your team and really having consistent ongoing relationships where everybody was always getting better. And you also didn't have a problem letting people go that weren't a good fit. So maybe you could just wrap us up, Jeff, with just kind of summarizing these last few bullet points on how to move from being a me to a we and how to keep that team growing and going rather than having to refill and replace.
When I look at hiring, training, coaching, and retaining and terminating, the one thing that comes to mind, I mean, I could spend an hour on each one of those things, but the one thing that comes to mind is when I hired people and I said, hey, your start date is in 2 weeks. When they showed up in 2 weeks, I had their cell phone on their desk. I had their email address set up. I had their login and password for Salesforce. And it actually looked like I gave a damn. Like I spent some time getting ready for them, because the one thing that I did that I think was such a big part of my success was I cared about my people. Hey, you're coming to work for me on a $30,000 a year base salary that doesn't pay your mortgage. We need to get you making $100,000 a year. We're partners and I'm going to help you. And people knew that I cared about them, even though I'm paying them a crappy base salary, no money. It's going to be both of us. We're trade, you give 50%, I give 50%. So I can't tell you how many salespeople I hired that said, oh, I started this new job and they didn't have anything ready for me. They were so disorganized. They did no training. They just threw a box of business cards on my desk and said, go sell. I mean, that's like rude. And that doesn't make the employee feel good, like you care about their success when you did nothing for them. So I really went out of my way to do a 5-day training. And I only did couple hours a day. I had a few other people training, but spend some time with them, show that you're prepared for their start date. And then ongoing, I spent a half hour a week with 20 salespeople, or 10 when I managed the team. I got sales managers and I got out of that role. It's not super fun, and I did it for like a year, but I knew if I do it for a year and I build this team, I can hire someone to take this over. I don't have to do it forever, because I don't like meeting with 20 salespeople every week for 30 minutes, because there's always drama and personal stuff. And it's like, it gets old, it's not fun. But I did it for a year until I could find my replacement. Duplication, right? Find my replacement. I don't have to do this forever. Just got to get this thing rolling. So, people in my company, all the salespeople knew that Jeff cared about their success. And I showed that. And sometimes I would go out of my way to try to help them. I mean, that just went a long ways. Not too many good people left my companies, because nobody gives a crap about anybody out there in the world. So if you just care a little bit, you're like miles apart, I mean, I can't overdo it and be codependent and do stuff like that, right, Nancy? I got that issue going on, so I can't do it for them. So I'm kind of like, I'm going to do something, you're going to do something. This is going to be like, but just the fact that I cared about my employees and their success, I really wanted them to succeed, because if they made money, I made money, right? I knew that. So it's a little selfish deep down. Like, if they ever quit or I fired them, it's not like we stayed best friends and went to picnics together. You're out of my life. You're not part of the company anymore. This is the company's plan to grow. But while they were there, I did give them a lot of, extra effort. And I think people knew that and felt that, and they were pretty loyal. I just didn't, I don't know, that wasn't made the business a lot easier to keep people, just because I cared. And preparation for their start date was a big deal. Nobody does that. And little training manual, even if it only took a few hours to put together. I'm going to hire 50 salespeople over the next year. It's good to put 5-10 hour investment up front, because I'm going to use this over and over and over again. Once I did it, it was easy. I just would update it from time to time, but I don't know, that took a little bit of work up front. So all 5 of those topics to me came back to onboarding, caring about your employees, giving them a little training, being ready for them when they start, give them an email address, give them a Salesforce login, so they're not sitting there twiddling their thumbs for 3 days. They get so pissed. Like, I'm sitting here, you didn't give me anybody to call. Where's my leads? I would light up a sales manager. You started that person and they sat there for 2 days without making money. Don't forget, we're paying a minimum wage-based salary. They need to get into commissions like month 2. So why haven't you given them leads to call, for example? Just so I prepared, and I think that I know it made a huge difference in my companies. All 3 or 4 of them that I built, that was a big part of it, and it wasn't that much harder. And I felt better about it, I was invested in their future. One of our core values at my company was invested. So, innovation, invested, and integrity was our 3 core values. Well, if I'm not invested in them, they're not going to be invested in my clients. And I want them to take care of my clients so they order more and drives revenue. So anyways, that's just my soapbox speech on
That's great.
preparedness and being invested a little bit in their futures.
Well, we've covered quite a bit, and the sales growth plan just was, again, just a kind of a finish up of step number 4, and we also discussed the steps that we try to drill down and grow my profit to help leaders to scale not only themselves but to scale their business, and talking about habits and priority management, peak performance culture, organizational charts. So, does anybody have any other questions or comments before we wrap up for today? Nancy, are you trying to get to the mute button or unmute button, or are you good?
So advice for going from 0 employees or contracted people to 1, what would you say? Because I am the type of person who's like, I try to hire someone from overseas and I try to train them and they could not get it and they couldn't hear my voice in the sense of the documents. And it's just like,
Can you just tell me just in 30 seconds, the business that you're trying to build? Is it like, can you just tell me a little bit about what you're selling so I want to, before I answer that question, what are you selling?
So there's 2 routes that I'm going. One route is selling courses on a specific topic, and another route is selling a certifications, how to be certified on this kind of coaching.
So my first advice to you is don't hire one, hire two so they compete against each other, because the one salesperson can come back and go, oh, this is no good. It's too hard. We're never going to sell this. But if you hire two, they kind of compete against each other. I never hired one person at a time. Get two, because they'll compete against each other. And probably one's going to quit because they don't see themselves making money fast enough. And then you don't get so deflated like I hired one and they quit. I hired one and they quit. If you hire two, one will probably stick around and it'll probably be the one you want that has some feeling about the product, like they like it. Like I think we're helping people. I think your product would be helping people, and someone's going to care about that and get invested in the business and the product. So hire two, put them on a very small base so that you're not ditching all the money you pull out of your company to pay your bills, right? Like small bases, two people, have some leads for them to call, have some, if they're reaching out on LinkedIn or Instagram, I don't know if you have any leads that are coming in that you can hand them here and there. That's kind of helpful to get them going. And I would honestly look at how you built your client base and figure out, how did I do it? Like we forget, like we just do it and we have clients from 10 years ago and referrals are coming in. We don't really remember what it was like to start. If you're asking these salespeople, go sell 20 new clients in your first 30 days, like try to remember what you did, how you did it, and give them a little bit of a roadmap. You're going to make these calls. Maybe you buy a little bit of data with people and phone numbers and give them something to do. Because sometimes it's like just calling people or emailing them and they start to get some interest and then learning from that. And they get better through time, duplication. I don't know if that helps, Nancy, but.
And I would even go expanding on, what are the specific duties that you think would scale revenue? And it may be putting you on the phone more. And so maybe delegating some of the activities that are lower level activities to a virtual assistant, or maybe even using technology and connecting with Vivian and what they do with AI and simplifying some of the work that you're doing and organizing processes. You may end up finding that you can get more done yourself and scale sales and maybe perfect the sales process before making an investment to a sales team. Just based on our previous conversations, Nancy, you may make sure that you have a good solid sales process so that you're duplicating something that's already been proven successful versus having somebody else that may be not as passionate as you trying to prove it out. Because just like what Jeff said, they're going to come back with all the reasons why it won't work, where you're going to find a way to make it work. And once you find the way to make it work and you document it, then you can hand it off and duplicate yourself. So thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Thanks, Jeff, for all of your wisdom and knowledge. And for those of you that have not already got a chance to take a look at Scale University, you can go to the link that's included with this video or in the chat, or just visit us at growmyprofit.com. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Take care.
Good seeing you, Nancy. Bye-bye.